Snow was falling gently from the sky, covering the whole city in white. It was early morning, and the streets were almost empty. Most people preferred to stay inside their warm homes, but Armin, the young CEO of a large company, was already on his way to work. He liked arriving before everyone else. It gave him a little peace before the long, stressful day started. His life looked perfect from the outside big house. Expensive car and a powerful job, but inside, he carried a quiet loneliness. As Armin's car stopped in front of the company building, something unusual caught his eye. A small figure was sitting near the glass door. He stepped out of the car and walked a little closer. The cold wind hit his face, and the snow crunched under his shoes. It was a little girl, around 6 or 7 years old, wearing an old pink jacket. Her hands were red from cold, and her hair was wet from the snow. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, shivering. Armin paused. What was a child doing here at this hour? He slowly approached her, so he wouldn't scare her. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked softly. The girl lifted her head. Her eyes were big, scared, and full of sadness. Her lips were trembling from the cold. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. Armin quickly removed his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Come inside. It's warmer there," he said. She nodded weakly. Inside the lobby, the heaters made the place warm and bright. Armin helped her sit on a couch. She held his coat tightly like she never wanted to let go. After a moment, she finally spoke in a very quiet voice. "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night." Armin felt a shock. He leaned forward. "Your mom? What happened?" The little girl wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Her voice was small, but full of fear. You were the last person she came to meet." Armin's heart almost stopped. Her words were simple, but they carried a heavy weight. He stared at the girl, trying to understand. I don't know," he said slowly. "What's your name?" "Aisha," she whispered. "And your mother?" "Sarah." Armin tried to think. He met hundreds of people every week, but the name Sarah felt strangely familiar. Aisha continued. "Mama said she had something important to tell you. She left home yesterday evening. She didn't come back. I waited all night." Her small hand shook while she spoke. She looked like a child who had been brave for too long. Armin felt something tighten in his chest. He wasn't used to emotional situations. His world was full of meetings, reports, and deadlines, not crying children, but this was different. "Did she call you?" Armin asked gently. Aisha shook her head. "She always calls, but not last night." Armin stood up and walked to the security desk. "Check the camera footage from yesterday evening," he ordered. The guard clicked through the screen. Strange. The recordings from last night were missing, completely gone. Armin frowned. How can an entire night be missing? The guard looked nervous. "Sir, I don't know. The system shows it was deleted." It deleted. By who and why? Armin turned back toward Aisha. She was staring at him with hopeful eyes, as if he was the only person in the world who could help her. "Do you know why your mother came to meet me?" he asked. Aisha slowly reached into her small bag. She pulled out a crumpled envelope. "My mom was scared," she said. "She told me, if anything happens to her, I should give this to you." Armin took the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were documents, and his company's name was written right at the top. Aisha's voice cracked again. "Please find my mom." Armin looked at the papers, then at the little girl. He didn't know what danger he was walking into. He didn't know who was behind this. But one thing was clear. A little girl had trusted him, and he could not let her down. Armin sat quietly for a moment, holding the envelope in his hands. The papers inside felt heavier than they should. He looked again at little Aisha, sitting on the large lobby couch with his coat wrapped around her like a blanket. Her legs were too short to touch the floor, and they swung nervously back and forth. He took a slow breath and opened the envelope. Inside were printed documents, handwritten notes, and a small photo of a woman, Aisha's mother, Sarah. She looked tired in the picture but kind, with warm eyes and a gentle smile. Armand felt a strange pull in his heart. He did not know her personally, yet something about her face felt familiar. He flipped through the papers. They were related to his company financial numbers, contract details, and internal reports. But what shocked him most were the highlighted lines. Some numbers did not match. Some signatures looked copied. Some reports were missing entire sections. It was not small mistakes. It was fraud. He stared at the documents with disbelief. How did she get all this? He whispered to himself. And who did she show it to? He looked up to find Aisha watching him with worried eyes. Sir, is something wrong? She asked softly. Armand didn't want to scare her. I'm just trying to understand it, he said gently. Do you know where your mom got these papers? Aisha shook her head. Mama worked very late these days. She was always tired. She said someone in your company was doing something bad, and she wanted to tell you. Armand felt a sharp pain in his chest. Why didn't he know anything? Why didn't anyone tell him? He stood up suddenly. Aisha, come with me. He led her to the elevator, holding her hand so she wouldn't feel alone. They went up to his office on the top floor. It was warm and quiet, with large glass windows that showed the city covered in snow. Aisha looked around the room with wide eyes. Is this where you work? Yes, Armand said. And today, this is where we find your mother. He placed the documents on his table and pressed the intercom button. Call Mr. Cameron to my office. Now. Cameron was the company's operations manager, the man responsible for internal files, reports, and approvals. He was trusted, or at least Armand thought he was. A few minutes later, the office door opened. Cameron walked in with a stiff smile. Good morning, sir. You called? Armand didn't smile back. Where is the camera footage from last night? Cameron blinked. Camera footage? I'm not sure. Maybe there was a technical problem that deleted the entire night. Armand's voice was cold. Cameron gulped. His eyes shifted nervously toward Aisha, who sat quietly on the chair hugging Armand's coat. And who is this? Girl, Cameron asked. Armand stepped in front of her. This is Aisha. Her mother came here last night with important information. She never returned home. Cameron's fake smile froze. A tiny twitch appeared at the corner of his mouth. Sir, I don't know anything about that. Armand watched him carefully. Something was wrong. Cameron's body language, his eyes, his voice, everything seemed nervous and forced. Armand placed the documents on the table. These are from Sarah. Do you want to explain why our numbers don't match? Why signatures look forged? Cameron hesitated. Sir, I don't know where she got those. Maybe she stole enough, Armand said sharply. I am going to find her. And if you know anything, now's the time to speak. I really don't know anything, sir, but his fear said otherwise. Armand ended the meeting and walked Cameron out. Then he returned to Aisha. The snow outside was falling harder now, covering the roads and rooftops. The city looked peaceful, but danger was hiding beneath it. Armand knelt down in front of the little girl. Aisha, he said softly, I promise you, I will find your mother. No matter what. Aisha's small hand reached out and held his. And in that moment, Armand felt something he hadn't felt in years. Responsibility for someone's life. The search had just begun. The wind outside grew louder, hitting the glass windows of Armand's office like tiny stones. The snowstorm was getting worse, and the city was slowly disappearing under a white blanket. But inside the office, the silence felt heavier than the storm. Armand placed the documents back on his desk. His mind was full of questions, but one name kept repeating inside his head. Sarah? Who was she really? Why did she come to him? And why did she go missing the same night? He turned to look at Aisha. She was sitting quietly in the big chair, her feet swinging, her small hands tightly gripping the ends of his coat. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days. The dark circles under her eyes showed how scared she truly was. Armand softened his voice. Aisha, did your mom ever tell you she worked here before? Aisha nodded slowly. Yes, she worked in your company long ago. She said she loved her job, but then Someone made her leave. Armin felt something twist inside him. Do you know who? He asked gently. Aisha hesitated. Her boss? I think his name was Mr. Colm. She stopped. She couldn't remember the full name, but Armand didn't need her to finish. He already knew. Kamran. It was always Kamran standing between problems and truth. And somehow, Sarah's mystery pointed directly at him. Armand stood up, paced toward the window, and looked out at the storm. His breath fogged the glass. He was angry not just because a woman was missing, but because he felt blind in his own company. Someone was hiding something big and he had been too busy to see it. He turned back to Aisha. Did your mother say why she kept these documents? Aisha reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded note. Its edges were torn and the ink was slightly smudged. She told me, if anything happens to her, I should give this to you too. Armand took the note carefully. On it, Sarah had written in shaky handwriting, truth inside. Someone dangerous blocking the truth. Trust only Armand. He read the words again. Trust only Armand. His hands clenched. Why him? Why not the police? Why didn't she talk to anyone else unless she had no one else to trust? Before he could think more, his office phone rang loudly, cutting through the silence. Armand stiffened. He picked it up, sir, the receptionist said, her voice nervous. There was a report. Last night, a woman was seen outside the building around 11 p.m. She looked scared. She tried to enter, but someone stopped her. Armin's heart raced. Who? I don't know. The person wore a hood. Cameras inside were deleted, but the entrance camera caught a shadow. Armin's jaw tightened. Send me the photo. A moment later, the image appeared on his computer screen. A blurry figure? A woman standing near the gate. Another figure coming toward her. Aisha leaned closer. That's Mama. It's her. Armin zoomed in, but the other person's face was not clear. Still, the shape, the height, the body language, something looked familiar, too familiar, but he couldn't be sure. He stood straight. Aisha, we're going somewhere. Where? She asked, confused. To the HR records room. I need to check your mother's file. They took the elevator down to a lower floor. The building was quiet. Most employees were stuck at home because of the storm. The lights flickered slightly as wind pushed against the walls. The HR room smelled of old paper and dust. Armin searched through boxes until he found a file labeled Sarah Malik. He opened it, just as he feared. Important pages were missing. Her exit reason was changed. Her complaint reports were gone. Someone erased her history. Aisha looked up at him. Is this bad? Yes, Armand said softly. Very bad. Suddenly, they heard footsteps outside the room. Slow, cautious, almost sneaky. Armand quickly pushed Aisha behind him. The door opened slightly, then stopped. Someone was listening, someone who didn't want them there. Armand whispered. Stay behind me, Aisha. The footsteps moved away again. Armin felt a chill knot from the cold. But from fear, Sarah wasn't just missing. Someone wanted the truth buried, and now, they knew Armand was digging for it. The footsteps faded slowly, leaving only silence behind. But Armin's heart was still beating fast. Someone had been watching them. Someone who knew they had opened Sarah's file. He closed the folder quickly and held Aisha's hand. Come, he whispered. We should not stay here. Aisha nodded quietly, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't speak, but Armand could tell she understood the danger as much as he did. They walked out of the HR room carefully, checking both sides of the hallway before stepping out. The building felt different, now empty but unsafe, quiet but alert. Every shadow felt alive, every sound felt suspicious. Armin pressed the elevator button, but it didn't light up. Why is it not working? Aisha asked, her voice shaking. The storm, Armand said, though he wasn't sure. He gently pushed the stairwell door open and guided her down the steps. The lights flickered again as they reached the ground floor. When they stepped into the lobby, the receptionist rushed toward him. Sir, The roads are getting blocked, she said. The snow is very heavy. Police are telling people to stay inside. Armand glanced at the huge glass doors. The snow was falling so thickly that the street was barely visible. Cars looked like white lumps. Streetlights glowed faintly through the storm like tired fireflies. Aisha, Armand said. Kneeling in front of her, we need to find where your mother went last night. Someone in this building is hiding the truth, and we can't wait any longer. Aisha looked scared, but she nodded bravely. I trust you, she whispered. Her words tightened something inside Armand. That small voice held more strength than he had felt in years. He stood up with new determination. Before leaving, he went to the security room, sir. The guard said nervously, The footage you asked about? More files are disappearing automatically. Someone is deleting everything from last night. Armand clenched his jaw. Show me what's left. The guard pulled up one last remaining clip. It showed a blurry figure leading Sarah out of the building gate. The person's hand was gripping her arm tightly. It wasn't only a shadow, someone was dragging her. Zoom in, Armand ordered. The guard tried, but the image remained unclear. Only one thing stood out. A silver ring on the kidnapper's hand. Armand felt his stomach drop. He had seen that ring before several times in meetings and hallways, Kamran. His heartbeat sped up. Was he sure? Not fully. But the ring looked exactly like Cameron's family ring, a ring he never removed. Sir, the guard asked carefully, do you think this is someone from inside? Yes, Armand said slowly. And they don't want us to find out. He took Aisha's hand again and walked toward the exit. The cold wind slammed into them the moment the door opened. Snowflakes hit their faces sharply. Their breath turned to white mist instantly. Aisha held his arm tightly. It's so cold. Armand wrapped his scarf around her head. Stay close. We'll move fast. They rushed through the storm toward the parking area. Snow piled up around the cars, almost reaching the doors. Armand brushed off the snow from his vehicle and helped Aisha inside. The engine struggled to start but finally came to life. The heater blasted warm air, and Aisha let out a relieved breath as they drove forward. The road disappeared under thick snow. Street signs were covered. The sky was white. The ground was white. Everything looked like one endless blur. But Armand kept driving. We're going to the old industrial area, he said. Your mother was last seen near a warehouse there. How do you know? Aisha asked because someone wanted her away from people. Somewhere quiet, somewhere dark. The car slid slightly on ice, but Armand regained control. The wind howled louder as they reached the outskirts of the city. A row of abandoned warehouses appeared through the snowy fog gray. Lifeless buildings that looked like frozen monsters. Aisha held her breath. Mama, is she there? Armand parked the car. I hope so, he said softly. But no matter what happens, I won't let anything happen to you. Aisha's small fingers slipped into his hand again. Together, they stepped out into the storm and toward the truth. The wind screamed across the open space as Armand and Aisha stepped out of the car. The warehouses stood like giant shadows, silent, empty, and threatening. Snow covered their roofs, and the broken windows looked like dark eyes staring at them. Aisha squeezed Armand's hand. Is Mama really inside one of these? She whispered. Armand knelt beside her. I'm not sure, but this is the place she was seen last. We will check every building if we have to. Aisha nodded bravely, though fear trembled in her voice. They started toward the first warehouse. The door was half broken, hanging loosely from its hinges. Armand pushed it open slowly. The inside was cold and dark. Old wooden crates were scattered around, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the empty space. Aisha held his coat tightly. It's scary. Armand placed a hand on her shoulder. Stay behind me. They walked carefully, listening for any sign of life. But the warehouse was empty. They checked the second building. Nothing. The third. Nothing. Snow kept falling harder, and the sky grew darker. Time was running out. At last they reached the fourth warehouse, the largest and oldest one. The door was locked with a thick chain. but Armand noticed fresh footprints in the snow leading inside. Someone had entered recently. "Aisha," he whispered. "Stay close." He looked around and found a broken metal rod on the ground. With all his strength, he hit the lock. The first strike didn't break it. He tried again, and again. On the fourth hit, the lock snapped. The chain fell to the ground with a loud clang. Armand pushed the door open. Cold air rushed out, carrying a faint smell of dust and oil. The inside was darker than the others. Only a few thin beams of light entered through cracks in the wall. They stepped in slowly. Then they heard it. A soft sound, a weak voice, a cry. Armand. Aisha froze. "That's Mama," she cried, running forward. "Wait, Aisha," Armand called, but she was already ahead. Her small feet echoed. Across the empty floor as she ran toward the voice coming from the far corner, Armand followed. Quickly, there against a stack of old crates sat Sarah. Her hands were tied with rope. Her hair was messy, her clothes torn, and her face pale. But her eyes were open. When she saw Aisha running toward her, tears rolled down her cheeks. "Aisha," Sarah whispered weakly. "My baby." Aisha hugged her tightly, crying into her mother's arms. Sarah struggled to lift her hands, so Armand quickly untied the ropes. Sarah winced in pain but smiled as she hugged her daughter properly. "You came. You really came," she said softly, looking at Armand. He nodded. "We're getting you out of here." But before they could move, a loud metallic sound echoed behind them, like a door slamming shut. Aisha flinched. Sarah's eyes filled with fear. Armand turned around slowly. A figure stepped out from behind the crates, a tall man, wearing a dark coat, and on his right hand, a silver ring. Cameron. His smile was cold, mocking. "You should have stayed out of this, sir." Armand moved Aisha and Sarah behind him. "Where's the police?" "They'll be here soon," Cameron laughed. "In this storm? They can't even reach the main road. You're alone here." He took a step forward. Armand clenched his fists. "Why did you do this?" "Why her?" "She found the fraud," Cameron said calmly. "And she recorded everything. I couldn't let her ruin years of planning." He pointed toward Armand. "And you were too blind to see the truth. Too easy to fool," Aisha cried softly. Sarah held her close. Armand stepped forward. "Let them go. This is between you and me," Cameron smirked. "Oh, I plan to finish it today." He pulled a metal rod from behind a crate. The moment he raised it, Armand grabbed a wooden plank lying on the floor. The two clashed with loud, sharp sounds. Metal against wood. Strength against desperation. Cameron swung wildly, trying to hit Armand's head, but Armand blocked it. The wooden plank cracked. Armand pushed Cameron back, sending him stumbling. Cameron roared and charged again. This time, Armand dodged and hit him hard in the shoulder. Cameron fell to the ground. At that moment, sirens echoed outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the cracks. Police had arrived. Cameron tried to run, but officers burst through the door, tackling him to the ground. Aisha cried in relief. Sarah held her tightly. Armand exhaled deeply. They were safe, but the storm outside was not the only one that had just ended. Snow continued falling outside as the police carried Cameron out of the warehouse. His hands were tied and he looked furious, but he could no longer hurt anyone. The officers thanked Armand for his bravery and rushed Cameron into the police vehicle. Inside the warehouse, the air finally felt safer. Sarah sat on the cold floor, holding Aisha close. Her eyes were tired but full of relief. Aisha kept touching her mother's face, as if making sure she was real and not a dream. Armand watched them quietly, feeling something warm in his chest. He had fought many business battles in his life, but none had shaken him the way this night did. After a few minutes, he walked toward them slowly. "Sarah," he said softly, "can you stand?" Sarah tried to get up, but her legs trembled. Armand quickly offered his arm, and she held it for support. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to thank me," he replied gently. "I'm just glad we found you." Aisha hugged his leg tightly. "You saved my mama," she said, her eyes shining with gratitude. Armand placed a hand on her head. You were very brave, Aisha. Much braver than most adults. Aisha smiled softly and held her mother's hand tighter. The police escorted the three of them to Armand's car. The ride to the hospital was slow. The snowstorm had not calmed. Streetlights flickered behind white curtains of snow. Everything felt quiet, almost peaceful. Inside the car, Sarah leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Do you want to rest? Armand asked. I'm okay, she whispered. I just can't believe it's over. Armand glanced at her. It's not fully over. We still need to clear your name. We need to expose everything Cameron did. Sarah looked down, guilt in her eyes. I tried to warn everyone, but no one listened. Armand tightened his grip on the steering wheel. I'm listening now. Aisha looked up from the back seat. Mama told me you were a good man. Even before she met you, Armand felt a strange warmth at her words. I hope I can live up to that. When they reached the hospital, doctors rushed to check Sarah after a quick examination. They confirmed she was tired, bruised, and dehydrated, but safe. Aisha refused to leave her mother even for a second. She sat next to her hospital bed, holding her hand like she would never let go again. Armand waited outside the room for a while, giving them space. When he finally entered, Sarah smiled softly. You didn't have to stay. Armand shook his head. Yes, I did. There was silence for a moment. Sarah looked down at her bandaged wrist. I never wanted trouble. I only wanted to protect the company. When I discovered the fraud, I thought telling you would fix everything. I didn't expect Cameron would. Her voice broke. Aisha hugged her arm tightly. Armand sat on the chair beside her bed. I'm sorry, Sarah. I should have known what was happening inside my company. I should have seen the signs. It wasn't your fault, she said gently. Cameron hid everything carefully. Armand sighed. Not anymore. Tomorrow morning, the entire board will see the evidence. Cameron will face justice. Aisha looked up at Armand. Will Mama work again? Sarah shook her head sadly. I don't think so. But Armand interrupted her. Yes, she will, he said firmly. Sarah, I want you back at the company. And this time, I will make sure you work in a safe, honest environment. You will have authority. You will help rebuild the system, so nothing like this happens again. Sarah's eyes widened. Armand, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he replied. Just say yes. Aisha beamed. Mama, say yes. Sarah laughed softly through her tears. Yes, I'd like that. Armand smiled for the first time in a long time. As morning approached, the storm finally began to fade. The sky turned light gray and snowflakes drifted more gently. Almost peacefully. Aisha climbed onto her mother's lap and looked at Armand. You know, she whispered, if you didn't come this morning, I don't know what would have happened to us. Armand looked at her with soft eyes. Sometimes, he said quietly, the smallest voice can save the biggest truth. And for the first time in years, Armand felt he was exactly where he was meant to be,